Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to cut off the poll. If you didn't get a chance to finish it, I'll relaunch it at the end of the meeting, and you'll be able to fill it out before you sign off tonight. But it's 6 o'clock, so let's get started. Hello, this is the Baldwin Avenue Traffic Calming Meeting number 2. On behalf of the City of Ann Arbor, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us in this opportunity to engage with you. These traffic calming projects rely on resident feedback, so we really appreciate and encourage participation. Um, there's just a few things on this first slide, but we'll go through them in the next couple slides. But first, I'll just do some introductions. So it's it's been a few months since our first meeting. We may have some new attendees or people who didn't get to join last time. So just get some introductions out of the way. Uh, the Baldwin Avenue Traffic Calming Project team is a partnership between the City of Ann Arbor and Wade Trim. Wade Trim is an engineering firm based here in Southeast Michigan. We've been contracted by the city to assist with all of the traffic calming projects, so not just Baldwin Avenue, but a handful of other ones. This includes design work, project management, hosting these public meetings, sending out communications to the public. So from Wade Trim, the team members include Lori Pollock, Christy Thullen, and Chris Wall. I'm Christy, and tonight Lori is joining me to help with any technical questions that we might have pop up throughout the meeting. And then because we're working on behalf of the City of Ann Arbor, we've been working closely with the city's engineering staff. So Andrea Wright is an engineering analyst for the city and is the traffic calming program facilitator. She's provided Wade Trim with all the tools to make this partnership as seamless as possible. And Cynthia Redinger, she's a professional engineer. She's provided city-specific context for us just to provide guidance on our design to make sure it fits in with Ann Arbor standards and just what they've had experienced in the past working with resident projects. And then this is our meeting agenda for tonight. Most of tonight's time will just be dedicated to the traffic calming process where we'll review and discuss each of the devices. But first, I'll just go over some of the technology overview. And I know a lot of people are familiar with electronic meetings or Zoom meetings, but we'll just go over a few things. So if you're joining from a computer or using the Zoom app, there are going to be 2 ways of asking questions and providing feedback. You can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. This will notify the host, myself or Lori. You can also lower your hand with the same button. When recognized to speak, the host will allow you to unmute. And if you'd rather type a question or comment out, you can press the Q&A button, which is right next to that raised hand button there. I'll just point out right here. A chat box is going to pop up. You can type in the text box. You can then press send to submit your message. If you would like to send feedback anonymously, please just make sure you check the box there. And then for anyone who is dialing in by phone, which I don't see anyone tonight who is, but there is an option to raise your hand if you're calling in by a phone. You just have to press star 9, and you'll be recognized to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. You'll automatically be unmuted by one of us and then placed back on mute after you're done speaking. But if you are calling in by phone, you would not be able to use the Q&A function. And then there are going to be multiple points throughout the presentation tonight where community feedback will be requested through the through Zoom's polling feature. Again, if you're on a computer or using the app and a poll is launched, it'll just automatically pop up for you. After you answer the polling question, you can press submit. When the poll closes, the results will automatically pop up. And then to stop viewing those, you can either press close, or at some point, I'll just close out the results for everyone so we can move on with the presentation. And Again, if you are calling in by phone, you are able to participate in polling. It's just, it won't be anonymous. You'd have to raise your hand. Um, you'd be recognized by the last 3 digits of your phone number. The host will read the question and any available responses out loud, and then give you the opportunity to cast your vote in the polling. So just as a recap and a test for that, I will launch a poll. And if you can just drop your answer in there. Question is, do you live in the project area? This project area is on Baldwin Avenue between Packard Street and Stadium Boulevard. And then I'll share the results. So those should pop up on your screen now. So everyone attending tonight is a resident, is in the project area. So that's perfect. Go ahead and clear the results. And we can move on. So just during the presentation, especially during any feedback from fellow community members, just please keep these in mind. Start on time, end on time. I know it's the end of the day, so I don't want to waste anyone's time. I know a lot of people might have spent the day at work or doing other things. Please raise your hand to be recognized to talk. There will just be one speaker at a time. If you are speaking, move to a quiet area. Try to silence any background sounds when speaking. Make sure you're speaking loud and clear so everyone can hear you. Everyone will be provided a chance to speak before we have any repeat speakers. Please be respectful of other ideas and perspectives. No finger pointing. Try to differentiate between I know and I think. And lastly, any inappropriate written and or verbal comment or language, including personal attacks and accusations, will result in that attendee from being removed from the meeting. So zero tolerance on that. If there's anything I've missed, I will pause here. And if there's anything you want to put in the chat or raise your hand just before we get started, we'll take a breather. And I'm not seeing anything, so go ahead and move on. Again, just please go ahead and use the Q&A function freely. We'll be monitoring throughout the meeting, but just to keep with the agenda, we might wait for some breaks in the presentation to answer any questions or have anyone speaking. But as we move on, just know that you can use the Q&A whenever. So this is the preliminary plan. This was mailed to project area addresses, so yourselves and other residents. And it was also marked in the street for a self-guided tour. So if you're here at the last meeting or if you had seen the starter idea, not much has changed. We've just moved one of the devices closer to Cherokee Road. But it is two of the same devices, still two speed humps. I'll just go over in the next slide as a refresher what speed humps are and what they're meant to do. But this is just an overview of what our plan looks like. So just as a refresher, this is a speed hump. These are the devices that you saw in the plan. A typical speed hump diagram is on the left, and then the example on the right side of the slide is from Wells Street. Speed humps, they're typically 12 feet long. They're about 3 inches high. They have a parabolic shape. They extend the full width of the street except for the gutter. And studies have found that the benefits of speed hump treatments may include speed reduction, traffic volume reduction, and crash reduction. Some of the things to note regarding speed humps are that the 3-inch height is designed with bike safety in mind and ease of bike usage. If previously permitted, vehicles can park on speed humps. So if with on-street parking, there is no issue with speed humps there. And additionally, trash cans can be placed on speed humps if necessary. And then, so I'll just go through the devices one by one and we'll zoom in on them. But were there any questions regarding speed humps in general before we move on? Oh, go ahead, Christian. You can unmute.
Okay. You mentioned that the 3-inch height is designed for bicycle safety. Are there
Yes.
other considerations for the height of speed bumps, or is it just bicycles?
Do you mean like, in other words, like why is there a reason why we don't go greater than 3 inches?
Right.
I mean, we do it. It does also consider vehicle safety as well. Like we don't want it is the speed hump is parabolic, so it's not like a wall that vehicles hit.
Right.
So the design and the height even is also meant for vehicle safety as well. But bicycle safety, importantly, we don't go. The city doesn't want to go higher than 3 inches. And then also from like just a safety standard, you don't want to go extremely high because then you don't want to create something that will risk damaging vehicles.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, there are some areas that have speed bumps as high as 6 inches, but in the city, we just are using 3 inches, as Christy mentioned, for the bike safety, and then just for vehicle, you know, not to damage vehicles as well.
Yeah, because I'm a bicyclist, and I, of course, bike frequently on Iroquois, where the speed bumps are higher, and for bikes, it doesn't really matter all that much. It seems
Mm,
that it's really cars that have trouble with the higher with the higher speed bumps.
that's good to know. I will say though, I know in these meetings, Iroquois often is used as an example
Yeah,
of what residents would like to see or what resident kind of what gets referred to a lot. And I don't know what year those were installed, but I do know that is no longer um, what the traffic calming program is considering to use as their standard.
right.
So I know some people love it, and but unfortunately we weren't able to design it the same way.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And then Bob, I saw that you have your hand raised, so you can go ahead and unmute if you'd like.
Thank you very much. I ride a motorcycle, and I find any height is not a problem at all. And because there's so much speeding traffic on this street, I would prefer to see a little taller speed bumps, despite the fact that city only wants to go 3 inches. You know, you don't live on the street, and it's just really, I've almost been hit by cars crossing the street up the way there at the corner, and you know, they don't slow down. They don't care. And, you know, we got small children that live in 2 different houses on this street, and I'm really worried about their safety. So I'd really like to see higher speed bumps than 3 inches. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then before we move on, Marissa, I see you also have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi there. So I have 2 comments. One is, I know we're talking about speed bumps. I wondered, just given what Bob spoke to, how busy the road actually is, has there been any consideration ever to closing one end of the road? That's one question. So that one, because it's such a pass through and not really sure how much the traffic will decrease with the speed humps. So that's one question. And then the second question is, has there been any consideration to adding a stop sign in between, right at the cross of Cherokee and a three-way stop, I'm sorry, between Cherokee and Baldwin?
Okay. I will say, so both of those things are outside the scope of this program. They're not necessarily things that the city can't address or explore, but with this program, we can't propose those things, but I can provide, I can make sure I give you the proper channel to follow up with that on. If it's something that our program can reach out to someone on behalf of you, we will do that. But alternately, after this meeting, usually we post a discussion summary that just has notes of the meeting. So I'll make sure to have resources for both of those if there are things that we can't address on your behalf. And before I forget, if you, if anyone wants to provide their email address, you can go ahead and put that in the Q&A. I won't publish it, but you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A. So if you would like to receive any of our mailing notifications, usually before we send anything out in the mail, we also give everyone a heads up by email who's on the list. So for that, and then if there's anything like with the stop sign or with street closure, if you would like a follow-up by email, just if you can provide your information, and then I'll make sure to send you something afterwards.
And Christy, just one thing I was gonna mention about cul-de-sacking. So if we were going to permanently close a street and cul-de-sac it, there would be requirements for having enough room and space for emergency vehicles to be able to turn around.
Mhm.
So those require quite a bit of space often. And those could be a big construction item as well, and just a lot of other considerations, such as fires and emergency vehicles, things like that. And just looking
Sure.
at them, there may not be enough space. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Thanks. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yep.
If there weren't any other initial questions or comments, I'll just move on. So this is just a zoom in on device number 1. I believe this is the device that we've moved in closer to Cherokee, because at our first meeting, kind of discussed that that a lot of the speeding was seen mid-block, so in between Packard. It wasn't necessarily like right at the Packard intersection or Stadium intersection that people were observing speeding, but closer to Cherokee. So we've moved the devices closer together, although we do have to stick with the city's preference on spacing, because if you space these devices too close, it kind of has an opposite effect of what you're trying to do, because then they have more space to speed up after the speed hump. So this is a speed hump. It's near 1810 and 1811 Baldwin Avenue. Just as a reminder, the speed humps can result in speed reduction, traffic volume reduction, and crash reduction. If there are any questions or feedback specifically on the speed hump at this location, we'll pause here. because after this slide, I'll just launch a polling question and ask whether or not we support this device at this location. But if there's any additional feedback that you'd like to put in, we'll pause for a moment. Go ahead, Laura. I see you have your hand raised. You can unmute.
So I was just wondering, I understand the city has guidelines for how far apart they can be spaced, but is there a reason that we couldn't keep this speed hump and also put one closer to the intersection?
There wasn't enough room. This stretch of street is less than 600, if not close to 600,
Mhm.
and there just wasn't enough room.
Okay, yeah, I feel pretty strongly that 2 speed humps on the road is not enough to actually solve the problem, and that cars, while they may speed more in the middle, I don't know that it's true that they are not speeding initially turning off of either Stadium or Packard.
Okay. Thank you. And then Bob, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
I'm in agreement with the young lady who just made the comment that it would be really nice to have 3 instead of 2. I mean, we live on this street and we see this all day long, cars speeding through here. It's just awful. And if we could have one more device in the intersection, we could move the one that is closer to Packard, and that would help slow things down a bit. And I know that the street is short, but people put their foot down on the gas pedal and it's just amazing. It's like the Indy 500.
I believe I believe at the first meeting we had discussed doing a raised crosswalk at Cherokee or a raised intersection, and I'm just measuring the street again just to double check things. Let me go back to Marissa. I saw you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute if you'd like.
Thank you. I was going to agree with Laura and Bob. It's just such a busy street. You're coming off of a busy Packard, a busy Stadium, and cars whip through there to cut through. There really needs to be additional measures to slow down the traffic. Google Maps tells you to cut through this road. That's a
Mhm.
whole other thing. There needs to be a way to mitigate people having this as an identified alternative to cut through, given how much Packard and Stadium already back up. Our street becomes the default for them to cross and drive through, and they do drive through very fast, as you've seen in your assessment.
So I'm kind of without having to go and hold everyone up and pull up the starter plan. I don't believe we had proposed a raised device at Cherokee Road. I believe we discussed it with the so I have the overview here of the street. So there are a couple things that we had to keep in mind. All of these circular green and blue and brown circular items here are all utilities. So these are all manhole covers or covers to utilities. So with the raised devices, if you look at a speed hump. So you'll see that this device is typically 12 feet long, but these ends are tapered here, and sometimes that taper can go longer than 12 feet, depending on just the placement or what the city inspector says. But because of all of these utilities, if I recall, a raised crosswalk here would not have been an easy placement because we have utilities. So it would involve additional utility work. And then we have an existing fire hydrant here, and the fire department requires that we have that we maintain of a level surface for their access of at least 20 feet, I believe. So a workaround to having a raised crosswalk here would be to have a raised intersection, but because of the hydrant, that raised intersection would have to extend down Cherokee quite a bit. And then kind of the same thing that we were facing with raising the crosswalks here at either end of Baldwin was because we have all of these existing utilities, placing a raised crosswalk would not have been, I can't recall if feasibility was if it was completely off the table, but I know that it would have been a challenging install given all of the utilities here. That being said, I don't want to dismiss the fact that there is a very high concern with the speeding traffic here, and I don't want to say that these I don't want to say that the speed humps will do nothing, but I want to acknowledge that we would like to see more devices here, but because of the restraints, I don't believe that this was possible. It is a really, unfortunately, it is just a really short amount of street. And we do have to follow the best practices for device spacing and the number of devices. Just putting more things in there than we have space for could create more problems and could create a safety risk in itself. And I'm sorry, Marissa, I see you have your hand raised and I can't recall if you still have.
do.
Okay.
Well, as you were talking through this, my husband also wondered if, some streets have those pedestrian kind of, how would you describe them? They're they're posts that stick up, pillars or posts that stick up to slow traffic to
Yeah.
distinguish the lanes. I don't know if something
Yes.
like that had been considered as an additional measure to
They
slow the
are-
traffic. Does that make sense?
It does. So those are pedestrian gateway treatments. They are in the traffic calming guidebook that the city created as a device that can be used within this program. But because of the width of the street, the fire department would not let us install them. They did not want any that would be a vertical device, something you drive around. They did not want any of those if the street width cannot, if the street width is, they have to maintain, or sorry, we have to maintain 20 feet of unobstructed street for the fire department for emergency vehicles to pass through. So unfortunately, those devices were not an option. But I
So-
do, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you. I'm just wondering, so in light of that, that not being an option, a third speed hump not being an option, how do we then work through the ability to get a higher raised speed hump that can provide, again, another measure to hopefully slow down the traffic?
Yeah. I don't, from what I've been told, it's a flat no, that they're not going to do anything outside of what the guidebook. the issue is that the guidebook is pre-approved by city council, so anything that is outside of what the guidebook permits um, is a no for us. But I can follow up and just see internally if there are other avenues that can be explored for this area. I will note that part of this program does include a 1-year follow-up study. So if we proceeded with this plan of installing the 2 speed humps, and it gets constructed, there is a 1-year follow-up study that they do so they go again. The city will come back out and do another study like they did at the beginning of this program, where they're looking at what the 85th percentile speed is. They're looking at the crash history, if there is any. They're looking at, the volume of vehicles that are coming through here.
And another thing with the higher speed bump, so a lot of times if you have the higher bump, then the width of it is longer. So like your net, feeling of going over the bump, it's lessened because it needs to be a longer width, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not always necessarily going to feel like a lot more of a impact, because it does need to be longer so it doesn't bottom out the cars and things like that.
And Bob, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so with that said, with the follow-up study, because I was gonna ask about that, it's good to know that that's gonna happen. So what
Mhm.
happens after you put the smaller speed humps in and we find that it really hasn't made any impact on the speeding on the street? What do you do then?
At that point, as far as I know, the city will then explore solutions outside of the traffic calming program, because if there are still issues that weren't addressed within this program, then it's likely a larger issue that requires solutions, beyond the guidebook. I don't specifically know what the procedure would be. That's something that I can follow up with and make sure it's included in the discussion summary. If there's any additional procedure that they have outlined that we can share at this time, unless it's just something of, so I'll follow up. And but I do know that if the follow-up survey does show there's still an issue, it's likely a larger issue than traffic calming, or than the program can address. So I have, so there's an additional question. As follow-up, can you also confirm if a third speed bump is out of the question? Yes, I will make sure that we're 100% clear on the limits of the street and whether or not any additional device at the ends would be feasible. So that will be included as well. So I'm going to launch a poll question. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from this discussion on device 1, but I'm going to ask that you answer, if you don't want to see a speed hump at all, I would vote that way. If you still support the speed hump, even though there are additionals, like, you want to see a third device, you want to see if the speed humps could be taller, I would still say vote that, vote if you still support the speed hump, even if there are still additionals that we discussed that we need to follow up on. Because mainly I want to know if we need to scratch the speed hump altogether is basically what I need to know from this. So good. At least we're on the same page of we're okay with the speed hump, even though we want to see a third device, even though we want to see whether or not it could be taller than the standard 3 inches. So good. All right, thank you. And then moving on is the other speed hump. So, it's the same thing. There wasn't anything different than the first one. This one is near 1800 and 1803 Baldwin. They are spaced closer together, so that between the two, it's about 220 feet. 200, I believe. Like this is the closest that the city was willing to put the devices together. With the spacing, it's meant to spacing the devices like this. It's intended to create safe traffic calming. I know we still want to look at a third device and possibly a higher speed hump. So, we will look into that, but just same as number one. If there are any other additional feedback or questions that we want to go over, I'll pause here. And I'm not seeing anything. So the next slide is it's another poll question. Same thing. Do you support device number 2? So we're all in support of the speed hump, even though there are additional things we want to explore. And then Marissa, go ahead, and I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question around signage
Yeah.
for the road itself for Baldwin. I don't know if it's part of the traffic playbook or not, but signage around like no through traffic. Like basically, if you don't live in this neighborhood, you don't have a need to really pass through and use this as a cut through. Are there any signage measures that can also additionally be placed?
The only signs that are included in the program are any that are required with the devices itself. So with speed humps, usually there's signage for to warn you that there are speed humps up ahead. Community standards, which is a department within Ann Arbor, I know that they address the no parking signage and issues with the no parking. I'm not sure if they would also address the no cut through or no through traffic signing. I will double check and make sure that we know how to get that started or that request started. But unless it's a required signing with the device, the program doesn't look at additional signing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you happen
You're-
to know who, I guess, if not
Yeah.
you, who else that would be helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Bob, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead.
Okay, as for the signage that say no through traffic, we already have that on each end of the street. And it really doesn't make any difference because everybody cuts through here. And it's just amazing that people, don't read the signs, when we have neighborhood parties, we've put the barricades up to stop the traffic coming through, and people get out of the car and move them because it's inconvenient for them to have to go down to the corner of the traffic light. And the big deal was Packard used to be 4 lanes in each direction. And when they went down to 2 lanes, that's when people started cutting through these neighborhoods here to cut the corner and save time. And the traffic light down there at Packard and Stadium, only let so many through, and that traffic backs up. And that's why they cut through. It would be really nice if the city would make the light longer during the morning rush hour so that more cars could get through on Packard coming into town, and so that they don't feel like they have to cut through the neighborhood to get up the street.
Yeah, so because there are signs up there, so community standards is a department within the Ann Arbor Police Department. So between community standards and the larger enforcement group at the police department, I know that they can address violations like that. I do know from experience with one of the previous projects that the police department prefers to have residents or property owners reach them directly so that they have a direct communication with someone to follow up. So I would say with any enforcement issues, if you're seeing a lot of violations on the cut through traffic, that I can provide the information on how to request, but it's basically either you can call or you can fill out a form online to have them come out. Because I believe the sign is no trucks. No trucks and no through traffic. So yeah, I know the request. They prefer that the request comes directly from residents and property owners. If you're not able to find that, the information is online on how to reach or how to submit a request for them to come out. It is available online, but I will include it in the follow-up for you or for anyone who wants to use that. But I mean, other than those 2 poll questions and getting the feedback, that's it for the meeting. I'm always surprised when these go pretty quickly, but I honestly, I really appreciate everyone providing the feedback and providing additional context and telling me more of what you want to see, even if it is something that the program directly can't address. At least we have it on record, and I can in turn give it back to the city formally and say these are things that these residents would like to see. So with that being said, just 2 more slides here. These are our next steps. Following today's meeting, the presentation and the recording of tonight will be posted to the project website. I'll also follow up on those items. So a third device, a taller speed hump, pedestrian gateways, those raised devices at the crosswalks, stop signs, through traffic enforcement, excuse me, and the steps for a 1-year survey those are all things that I will follow up on, and we'll have answers or resources for you in a summary with the polling and other bits of information from the meeting. That will also be posted to the project website. Usually in 2 weeks is when I have everything up there. But you know, we need to have some internal discussion, and then we'll finalize the design plan. So once the final plan is ready, we'll post it to the project website, and we'll also mail the questionnaire to project area addresses. That'll be done by July 4th. I know it's a holiday, so, but we give you plenty of time. So we give you until July 25th to either fill out the poll online or fill it out and mail it back to us. So July 25th is the deadline for electronic submission or postmarking your mail-in polls. The requirement to move forward is that of those who participate in polling, there needs to be more than 50% approval of the final plan for it to move on. So there are 4 people here tonight. If 2 people support the plan and 2 people don't, it does not move forward. It has to be more than 50%. If the requirement is met, our team will then request support from the Transportation Committee during their August meeting. And then we'll also submit the plan for City Council approval tentatively at their September meeting. So if they approve it, then a construction date will be set, and things will move forward. Marissa, I saw you have your hand raised if you had any.
Yeah, I just had a question. I know the timeline info you just shared about the whole approval process. What happens after that, assuming it's approved, just looking ahead into the future and timeline? How does that work and look?
So then City Council has to determine a construction date. A lot of it is based on what they can fit in the construction year or within the budget. But once the construction date is set, I believe there's notification that, you know, the city will provide when construction is starting. Did that answer your question, or was there more that you?
I think so, and I probably should know this answer, but I don't. Like, what is the budget cycle? Like, when does the annual budget reset? Just in terms of when this approval actually happens to determine how close into the future this project would be happening.
Let me see if I can. So I believe the budget, construction budget, the year goes till June, I believe. I don't know that for sure.
So,
But I
like,
know
for
it's not a-
example, I'm sorry, for example, any projects post June, would they have already been determined for the next year?
Yeah, so right now I believe they've
Mhm.
already determined what projects they can fit within this calendar year.
So the soonest speed bump or hump would be constructed would be July of 2024.
Yeah, sorry, it's hard for me to look through
okay.
because I have email from previous projects and what the calendar year was. I can follow up. If that's okay, I can provide that
Sure.
later. And
Yep.
when the construction budgeting is, because I know that right now we're trying to fit in a lot of the traffic calming projects within the 2023-2024 season. So I don't want to say that all of them have been determined. But I just don't want to give you the wrong
Sure.
information.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course. And then Laura, I see you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I was just wondering what happens if the poll goes out and the residents don't 50% or more or more than 50% do not approve it. What happens then? Does that mean it's off the table? Does that mean there's further discussion?
No, at that point, then if if there is still a desire for traffic calming, then the process would have to start over, unfortunately.
Okay.
So if we have a lot of people who participate in the poll who do not support it, and it doesn't move forward to city council, then for it to be on the table again, or for us to be able to have these engagements, public engagement and planning this, it would have to start over with another petition.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So those were the dates. If you need me to go back there, I can move the slide back. But that is all. This is my contact information. I think I got everyone had submitted an email. So I'll make sure you're added. If I need to follow up on any of these other items, I will individually. But this is my phone number, my email, that's the project website. Please reach out if you have any additional thoughts or questions that might pop up after today, or even, after we publish the final plan. If you have any questions on that, please reach out. I'm going to launch another poll. It's actually a survey. This is provided by the city. So if you didn't get a chance to complete the demographic poll before the meeting started, I'd appreciate it if you can answer some of those questions before you leave today. This is just the city's standard poll so that they use to help engage further public engagement efforts. We're just 8 minutes short of 7 o'clock. If you have any additional question or comment, I can keep the meeting open for another couple minutes. Otherwise, I just want to say, I really appreciate your time, your care and your interest in this project. I understand that, we just want it to be safer for everyone, all users, pedestrians, and people who are on bikes or motorcycles. So I really appreciate your time and participation in this project. It really will help us make sure that we know, when I say we, the city knows what it is that you're in need of. So like I said, I'll stay on for another minute or so. I'll let people fill out the poll if they did not get a chance to. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.